try something different today, and it's not ASMR. I love baking, and I go through waves in my life, but I've gotten a wave that's come on pretty strong during quarantine, mostly for just a creative outlet. I used to sew. I picked up sewing a little again, you know, just these things, and I find I get bored with things quickly, so they shift, but baking has kind of stuck throughout my life. So my sister was saying that, you know, people like to know a little more about what's going on with people other than this one niche that they're in, or niche, however you're used to saying it. So I'm going to bake pretzels today with you, and if you want to learn how to make them, I'm going to give you the ingredients, and I'm going to kind of walk you through the process that I use. And I've only made them a couple of times, but I love them. I love pretzels that are, you know, the hard kind and the little stick pretzels. There's something about that salt on there. And I love the soft, chewy pretzels too. So that's the recipe that I'm going to make for you today, or with you today. So if you want to join me, here we go. I'm going to move the camera down to my little glass bowl. And hopefully you can see me okay. All right, so the ingredients that we're going to use are 1 cup of milk, and it needs to be lightly warmed. So you can choose to warm it in the microwave for 30 seconds. If you don't feel good about the microwave, then, you know, any of this can be done on the stove top. You don't want it so hot that it heats the yeast. You want it just warmer than body temperature so that you feel the warmth when you put your finger in it, if you do. I know that 30 seconds works for me. 2 tablespoons of sugar, and I use Marina sugar, but just white sugar is fine. And then I've melted the the butter, 2 tablespoons of butter melted, and I do that for 30 seconds in the microwave. And then I put in my ½ teaspoon of salt right into the butter, and I used today Himalayan salt, but any salt is fine. And then 2 teaspoons of yeast, and then 2 1/4 cups of flour. So there's my flour. So those are the basic ingredients. And then I usually keep some butter on hand, because you'll want to put that on the pretzels later. And I also keep a little extra flour in case I need to add more to the pretzel mix. And then 1/3 cup of baking soda you will need later when we boil the pretzels. And that's one of the unique features of pretzels. Okay? You boil them before you bake them, and that's part of what gives them that great flavor. All right, I'm going to start. And the first thing we do is put in our milk. Oops. And 2 tablespoons of sugar. And then our butter melted. It's funny, I'm so used to ASMR and being worried about making too much noise that I'm probably a little too paranoid with this. Okay, now mix it together. My spatula I burnt on the corner. I've got another one somewhere, but just a nice silicone spatula to kind of mix it together. And then it's about the right temperature because we've taken the chill off of it, because we want that yeast to be able to dissolve a bit and grow. So dump in your yeast. I've seen this done where they don't even touch it after this. I'm just going to lightly mix it together. And then you wait about 10 minutes for that to, I think they call it a yeast sponge, but for the yeast to start to grow. So we'll come back to you in 10. Okay, so I've waited 10-ish minutes, and you can kind of see that underneath there's a growth happening with the milk and butter being in there. Underneath you see that there's these little shadowy patches where the yeast is growing. Now, you can do this in a different order. Just know that the yeast is best if it dissolves and is in a warm environment where it can grow. Okay, I like to whisk the flour just a little bit to loosen it up and lighten it up. It's similar to sifting it. So we'll just stir it a little bit, and then I'm going to mix it in. So I've got my little bamboo spoon, and I'm going to put in a little at a time. so now I've got all of my flour in, and I've got my little extra standby flour, just in case. So we're gonna mix it until it's hard to mix with the spoon, and I've got almost all of the flour mixed in. You can see it's incorporated pretty well. I'll turn this around so you can see that side. And I'm to a point, and yes, my hands are washed, I'm to a point where I can put it on the counter and knead it. Now, you can see it's starting to stick a little bit to the bowl, so that lets me know that I've got to put some flour on the counter before I start to knead and work it that way. So I just put a little here. Let's see, I need to make sure I'm still in camera, don't I? That gives me a little more room. So, just, you can dump it, scrape it, however you want onto the counter. And I kind of just do this and flip it around so that I'm sticking as little as possible to the counter. I've got that rubber band on for some reason. Okay, so then just knead it for maybe 2 or 3 minutes so that if there's any little clumps of anything, of yeast, of butter, you know, any little, just little masses that need to be broken up and incorporated. And kneading is what starts to activate the gluten. So those of you that are gluten-free, there are recipes on YouTube if you type it in for gluten-free pretzels. I did look, and they look yummy, so you can do it. And those of you that can't do dairy or don't want to do dairy, I've definitely before done it with alternative milks. I actually don't do well with drinking straight dairy, so I like to do the same. With this one I did use the milk, but you can use the alternative. Okay, I'm just going to knead it another little bit here. You can see it's starting to get into a nice elasticity. And you don't want it to, I may have even put a little too much flour on there, you don't want it to get too stiff. Then they are not that nice, light, chewy pretzel that we love. So with kneading, you fold it over about 2/3 of the way. I mean, honestly, it's pretty close to the whole way. But, and then you push down and away. And that's basically getting the air bubbles out and activating. You can see that gluten starting to activate. And the gluten is what kind of makes it chewy and nice. So that's the thing you don't want to activate when you're making pie crusts, because you do not want to have those tough and chewy, and as they say on the Great British Baking Show, stodgy. So there we go. So there's my nice little, keep it in this bowl, but spray it with a little bit of oil so that it doesn't stick to the bowl. And then it's good to get the whole thing oiled. I'm using just a basic oil spray, right? A Winco, inexpensive brand, but you can oil it with your hands. You just want to get it all oiled. Then, so that it doesn't dry out, because it's easy, and then when it dries out, it starts to break, that outside layer gets tough. Then, it's a good idea to cover it. You can do wax paper, you can do a wet cloth. I'm just going to do a silicone lid, and then we're going to let it sit. So look again at how the size of that in the bottom. Let's see, I'll pull it over there, okay? And I'm going to set this in a warm place to rise. Sometimes I'll turn the oven on for just a minute and then turn it off so that it's a warm environment, and keep the light on in the oven so it kind of keeps that warmth, and that can help it rise. If it's, you know, middle of summer and it's warm out, you can just leave it out to warm on the counter. It's winter, so I'm probably going to do the very thing I just said. Turn the oven on just for a moment. You don't want it to start baking. So I make sure it's off, and sometimes even leave the door open before I put it in the oven. Okay, and then you're gonna let that sit for 60 to 90 minutes, excuse me. And then we're gonna roll them out, cut them, roll them, and make them into pretzels. So that's the step 2 part. So I'm going to let this rise, and then I'll let you see what that looks like. See you in a while. Okay, so time's up. I took off my lid, and now you can see that it's easily doubled in size, and it has these beautiful little bubbles. Can you see those? Got wonderful little bubbles. that let you know that it's spreading, growing, the yeast is grown. And now we're going to roll it. We're going to divide and roll it into pretzel shapes. So first up is, I'm going to again put just a little bit of flour down on my surface so that it doesn't stick too much, because, sorry about that, it is a light flour. And then we're going to divide it into 6 separate pieces. So I'm going to use my knife for that and just cut it in half and then divide that into 3 pieces each. And I'm obviously not using an exact science on that, so probably you can weigh it and divide it that way if you want to. So we'll start with 1 each. And after I roll it out and make the pretzel, it's good to put it on parchment. Apparently, if you put it on something metallic, it interacts with, we're going to be putting this in the baking soda, and it gives it a funky flavor. It puts a metallic taste to it, so you don't want that. So we're just going to roll and shape them, and then we're going to put them in some boiling water that has 1/3 cup of baking soda in it. So I'm going to get my water boiling, and I'll take you over to that when we're to that point. Get it as even as you can so that it bakes evenly. So you can see it's a little thicker on this end, so I'm going to work with that. I don't know how to do that whole twist it twice thing, so I'm going to just show you the simple method for me. That's still not quite right. I'm going to give that a little more of a roll to even that out. And you want it, 24 to 30 inches, somewhere in that range. So make a V, and then you're going to take the ends and twist them twice. So put it over once, and then twice, and then fold it back over. And then you can pinch those ends together, and it makes that beautiful little pretzel shape. So we're going to do 6 of those, and then I'll take you over to the stove and show you how you boil them, and then we'll bake them. So I'm going to turn my oven on to 450, which is pretty hot. Okay, I've got my water boiling, and I put in my 1/3 cup of baking soda and stirred it around. And you can see I've got my 6 pretzels ready to go. And by the time the water boils, it's allowed these to raise a little bit more, or rise a little bit more. And they say about 20 minutes, but I think that's almost a little too much. So it's about the right time. By the time you make them to let this boil, it's about right. Okay, so we're going to take each pretzel and carefully lay it inside the water, and they say about 90 seconds. And I just leave it in for a while and then flip it over, but you can be exact about that if you want. And let it boil a little bit more. And it will get those bubbles, as you can see in there. It starts to get a little more matter to it as you get a few of those going. And those bubbles are a lot like pasta, where you have to kind of blow them down because they get going. I might turn this down just a little too. Okay. I'm going to just do one at a time, and then I'm going to put them on here. Now, when they're done, once they're done, I'll hold that up so you can see it. A little different. See how that's wet and a little fatter, and then we'll bake it. So at that stage, once they're boiled and they're a little bit wet, then it's good to sprinkle on some of the salt. You can also brush them with egg white if you want them a lot shinier, but this is a good time when they're wet to sprinkle a little salt on them. All right, so here's what they look like before we pop them in the oven. You can see that the dough has kind of spread a little bit at points, which give it that nice streaked pretzel look. And they just look yummy, I can't wait. And that's my oven telling me that they're ready to pop in. So you can see that they're a wonderful, deep brown, a little more than a golden, I'd say. And they've plumped up beautifully. And now you can brush them with some butter, or they would be even shinier if you had the the egg wash on them. But I wanted to try them this way, and I'm perfectly happy with that. That one maybe got a little full, but I just think that's gorgeous. So anyway, brush them with butter if you want. If you like them crispier, then just let them cool, and the shell on the outside will be crispier. I'm going to definitely brush mine with butter. Okay, so here are our wonderful pretzels, and they smell absolutely divine. And I'm going to take one and put a little bit, I mixed, a couple of my favorite mustards together. So you choose yours. I've got the old fashioned, which is that real grainy, and then a brown mustard. And I'm gonna take one and put a little bit of mustard on there. Honestly, they're amazing. So try it. They're super easy. They take a minute, mostly to rise, but they're good. Thanks for stopping by.